Hi, my name is Bojalaloa Adiremi Makinde.
My name is Abongile Mashele.
My name is Avanti Maharaj.
I'm Juliet Ehimwa.
My name is Kez Njeri.
My name is Kerry Prisman.
My name is Eda Kay.
My name is Monica Kanguru.
I am Ayanda Mnyageni.
I am Ulua Tamilore Uni.
My name is Farzana Kupchandani.
My name is Carissa Dizon.
My name is Princelia Bogay.
My name is Jahara Lakram.
My name is Dawn Dimowo.
My name is Mpume Ngobo.
My name is Yvonne Dumont.
My name is Agnes Gathaya.
My name is Tulope Ahinyele.
My name is Abigail Anka.
My name is Dorothy Orko.
My name is Shala Fubisha Sayam.
My name is Sharon Mashira.
My name is Alda Tintinger.
My name is Ngozi Madueke-Dozie.
My name is Dumi Khonari.
My name is Felicia Otolorin.
My name is Rosemary Momanyi Opio.
My name is Misha Bika.
My name is Zanele Sachayo.
My name is Shikamonga.
My name is Christy Grant.
My name is Simisara NY.
My name is Bridget Ngobo.
I'm Asha Patel.
To me, breaking the bias means knowing and owning the knowledge that I bring value besides my gender. So aside from being a woman, I'm a professional, I'm a knowledgeable person, and I have a duty to make a contribution in every space I find myself.
Breaking the bias means fighting that feeling of not belonging. To me, it's incredible and unbelievable that I am where I am. I've always been in these spaces where I never quite thought I belonged. A classroom in the United States of America for university, one of the biggest banks in South Africa, sitting in a digital team, and now to be at Google. So breaking the bias to me means entering those spaces anyway.
Breaking the bias to me means that as an Indian woman, I don't necessarily have to choose between culture, tradition, and living my passion. It means that I get to be part of a world that can actually fulfill all of those requirements and experiences.
I grew up in a house as the only female grandchild with 7 boy grandchildren. My grandmother always thought that being a woman is a disadvantage, that you are born lower than the boys in the family. But I've broken this. I have done everything that the boys did, including play soccer and do gymnastics, and I was the first graduate grandchild in my family.
Right, being open to learning, listening deeply, understanding other viewpoints and perspectives, opening yourselves to new opportunities and adventures, and really knowing that things are different. People see things differently from different sides of their own worlds and different sides of the prism.
To me, breaking the bias means not letting your fears or your challenges get in the way of you trying to reach for your dreams and not letting you stop from putting your best foot forward.
Breaking the bias means letting go of judgment of myself and others. It's a work in progress, and I continue to be a work in progress.
One of the biases I've had to face, or I struggle with, because it's an ongoing journey, will be imposter syndrome. But then the major part of the imposter syndrome is being underestimated.
Breaking bias to me means leading with authenticity, right? In a world where everybody's trying to be like somebody else, I think it's so important to be yourself.
Breaking the bias means being my true, authentic self unapologetically.
Breaking the bias for me means believing that as women, we are more than capable to lead some of the most complex discussions around policy, public policy in tech, believing that we can champion and find resolution in some of the most complex discussions that we're seeing happening around the globe at the moment.
It means going beyond perceived limits, giving everyone the freedom to bring all of who they are to the table in service of their greater self.
Breaking the bias means living my life and performing in such an excellent way that naysayers will be proved wrong, and then creating that space for others to do the same. It's about walking into any conversation, knowing that I have the confidence to challenge the status quo around any biases that are applied in any given situation.
Stepping outside of norms, stepping outside of
comfort zones, stepping into things that might be uncomfortable, but things that you would like to explore.
Breaking the bias to me means being accorded equal opportunities, calling out the biases, and advocating for women in the workplace and beyond.
Allowing humans of any gender, race, status, or preference an equal opportunity.
Challenging professional partners to introspect in their individual bases as to what they can contribute to make women thrive in their own workspaces.
Breaking the bias means to me speaking my truth, allowing my voice to be heard. The world needs to hear me.
Breaking the bias to me means challenging stereotypes about who you are, how you need to act, think, and behave.
To me, breaking the bias means being able to change our internal narratives, which is often riddled with preconceived notions, in order to fully be able to take over our circumstances and to control them.
Breaking the bias starts with listening. And deeply listening is to be willing to have your mind changed by what you hear. Letting go of your own opinions so that you can be willing to hear new perspectives. And when we can change the way that we look at things, the things we look at can change.
Breaking the bias to me means not exchanging one bias for another. It's moving beyond the singular barrier or stereotype into the multifaceted reality of individuals. We can't break the bias with a hierarchy to inclusion.
First, being aware of what our own internal biases are and understanding how we can best navigate them to make the world around us and our approach to the world around us better.
Breaking bias means motivating and calling out bias whenever it happens, and creating an environment where everybody around me feels safe enough to call it out.
Breaking the bias for me is really stepping into that boardroom and sharing my knowledge and my expertise despite not being heard, despite not being seen, nor acknowledged, but showing up either way.
Breaking the bias to me is to stand up for what I believe in, to speak up, to be the voice of reason, and to show up for my fellow women.
Having to join Google and being the first in my family, for that matter, a female, is something that I consider breaking the bias.
So breaking the bias means not making assumptions when you see somebody based on their gender, based on what, the way they speak.
Breaking the bias means to me having a chance to be whatever and wherever I want to be without any limits based on gender, my age, my race, or any other biases.
What breaking the bias means to me is that it's okay for me to raise my voice, especially being young, black, and female and being underrepresented in many corporate and academic spaces. It's okay for me to fulfill my dreams and not be apologetic about it.
The biggest external bias that I've broken in my life and career is that my race, gender, and age speaks to my beauty, but not my competence.
Coming from a background of mainly medical science, I was a nurse, I was a midwife, and transiting from that into content, into TV, and into tech was really something that I had to tell myself I could do.
Being more intentional about what I wanted, so my end game was to make sure I land a full-time role here, and to be able to do that, I needed to prove myself that I deserve such a position. And I had to do that in 12 months or less, unlike others who had 18 months. So every decision, every project, every contribution I made was intentional in that direction, and in the end, I made it.
The biggest internal bias I think I've had to fight, and I still fight today if I'm being honest, is just an awareness and acknowledging the fact that it's not all rose-colored glasses and these biases exist. I'm an idealist by nature, and so just being able to understand that not everyone has good intentions and these things exist.
Look me up for breaking the bias by listening deeply and listening with intention.
Look me up for breaking the bias by helping me create an environment where all women feel safe to thrive.
Look me up for breaking the bias and trying to treat everyone equally.
Look me up for breaking the bias by putting your best foot forward.
Look me up for breaking the bias by being a thought leader in ICT regulatory policy and tech in Africa.
Look me up for breaking the bias by creating space for women at the table, every day, everywhere.
Look me up for breaking the bias by having a meaningful impact on people's lives.
Look me up for breaking the bias by not conforming to the norm, but being okay with it.
Look me up for breaking the bias and living life by my own rules.
Look me up for breaking the bias by being a catalyst for change and a reminder that the sky is not a ceiling at all.
Look me up by breaking the bias by being seen and being heard.
Look me up for breaking the bias by being courageous despite adversity.
Look me up for breaking the bias by leaving everything and everyone in a better condition than what you had found them and it in.
Look me up for breaking the bias by creating space.
Look me up for breaking the bias by showing up and owning your seat at the table.
Look me up for breaking the bias by being my authentic, true self, unapologetically.
Look me up for breaking the bias by encouraging women to take up space.
Look me up for breaking the bias by showing up, being myself, and making a difference.
Look me up for breaking the bias by believing in yourself beyond any limit.
Look me up for breaking the bias by being intentional.
Look me up for breaking the bias by overcoming gender stereotypes.
Look me up for breaking the bias by being super badass and being creative.
Look me up for breaking the bias by being unapologetically me.